What is up? It's CJ here. Hope you guys are doing well. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of brands and why we buy them, and also industry standards and why that doesn't necessarily apply to some of us filmmakers who are not, doing a lot of work in the quote unquote industry. So I stumbled upon a couple of videos that I was watching that kind of brought this perspective to mind, and also going and purchasing some of the gear that I've recently purchased, looking at different brands and trying to find something that works for what I do. This topic has came up numerous times with me and my friends, and also just me in business. So a lot of what I'm talking about today has to do with the business side of filmmaking, as a small business owner, as someone who was trying to kind of carve an avenue for themselves in this quote unquote industry. But I want to make a division between the industry standard and being a business owner. I think there's a small business owner. I think there's a distinct difference between working in the industry of filmmaking, that is being on sets, where there are, teams of people who are working towards a common goal, trying to create a film, being considered a DP or a cinematographer, or someone who's actually creating films for the industry of the commercial world. I think that's one thing. I would say that's one thing. There's people who are consistently doing work of that kind. They require them to have industry standard equipment, industry standard tools, and there's a certain type of etiquette that comes along with being on set with other filmmakers and other people who are in the industry. And you can almost tell when someone hasn't been on those sets. I've been on those sets in a number of different ways. Now, mind you, I live in a small city. It's not relatively that big. There is some industry work that goes on here. But a lot of times, it's not being done by people or filmmakers who are from the area. It's usually they're flying in people or flying in crews. How do I know this? One, because when my family and I do industry work, we've done commercials for Walmart, we've done commercials for Target, we've been in some what else? I believe it was Xfinity. We've done commercials for them where they've flown out crew, directors, cinematographers, DPs, to come and shoot us on location, either at our house or in the location. We've been on those sets, and I've been in that capacity as the talent. But I also have been around it and in it from the capacity of actually filming and being on crew. And there's a certain standard that comes along with that. I mean, they're shooting these films on RE Alexas, and they're shooting them on industry standard lighting, like what is acceptable by the industry. And I almost liken it to it's like there's a lot of unwritten rules around it, and a lot of it is guided by the people who are leading the industry at the time. And that's how gear and different things become accepted, right? Certain people accept using them, certain people use them consistently in the industry, and that's how these particular lighting equipment and grip equipment and camera equipment, lenses, cameras. That's how they get accepted by the industry, is the industry accepts them and people use them and agree on that being the industry standard. Now, I think that has changed a little bit as time has moved on. I think more things are being widely accepted, but I want to distinctly put that over to the side. And then I want to talk about like being a business owner. And this is a long rant, but being a business owner, you don't necessarily do a lot of industry standard stuff. Now, you could if you were, maybe you own a grip truck, or you're, a DP or a cinematographer, or maybe you're a digitech, and you are purchasing and buying industry standard stuff so that you can be included in those gigs, get hired for those gigs, and do that type of work, right? But then there's the other side of it where filmmakers are just creating small films and creating films for different businesses and different organizations, real estate agencies, lawyers, doctors and medical practitioners. These people also need films as well. They also need, good quality films. But the difference is that on those particular sets and shoots, the business owner is the industry standard. And honestly, whatever they choose to get the job done is accepted. And a lot of times the client will know no difference between what you're using as a small business owner and what is being used in the industry. They see a big light or big production, and they think that they're all the same. There is no difference, right? Oh, this is what camera do you have? And you can tell them all the things that you want to tell them. They know no difference. They just know that it looks good and you look professional and the job is getting done well, right? And so what I'm getting at here is that there's a difference between those two different industries, and the difference between those two different types of work. And it's acceptable for you to use things outside of the industry standard to be able to get your work done. You don't have to buy the most expensive lighting equipment in order to get your work as a small business owner done for the small business owner that you're shooting for, right? Your equipment, the equipment that you own, does not have to be accepted by the industry or the industry standard stuff. And that is unless your business is to become a part of the industry, i.e. Digitech or something like that. And so when we're looking at being a small business owner, and I think a lot of what I've done in the past, especially on this channel and on other pages that I've created, has been centered around finding those small gems that no one is talking about. I remember being one of the first people to create a video about Godox and Godox lighting when it first came out, and when it was only able to be purchased on Amazon, and it wasn't an industry standard or equipment or widely accepted by people. Most people were just talking about aperture, and that was the kind of the main brand that people were freelancers were talking about. But one of the indications of something starting to be a little bit more widely accepted is, in my opinion, it being available on B&H, right? B&H has a good reputation, and a good reputation for supplying good equipment. And so if that piece of equipment is found on B&H, typically B&H has done their research. They've done their due diligence, and they've made sure it's a good product that represents the B&H brand well. And so if it's on B&H, you can trust it. I'm gonna say that. Doesn't mean it's the industry standard, but I feel like that has started to broaden a little bit more. B&H has started to accept more and more gear outside of the industry standard, and that's where your Godoxes come in. That's where your GMVs come in. That's where your small rigs and these smaller companies start to come in and be more widely accepted. And I think this is a good indication that technology has began to broaden, and not only began to broaden, but the bar has been raised as far as more and more equipment is being able to get the job done, and becoming better and better at a cheaper and cheaper price. That's where the GMVs come in with the new lighting gear that they have. They also just launched I believe the Rain series of lights, which is a really cool concept, and I am all for it. But I just found out that it was fairly expensive, about $1,500 per unit. But that is a concept that I feel like would be a great concept for small filmmakers, being able to build an array of lighting, being able to take one light, use it for this scenario, but then be able to take multiple lights and use it for another scenario. I think it's a great concept. I would love for it to be a little bit more affordable for the small business owner, but great idea and great kind of innovation going on there at GMV. But what does that say as far as like camera gear and purchasing a camera, and this dilemma that I've been talking about for a couple of days now, honestly? So I'm a small business owner, and I decided to go with Blackmagic cameras for my business. I think they serve pretty much and solve all of the problems that I have as a small business owner. Affordable, they get the job done, great quality, and the features that it has benefits me as a solo and sometimes small set filmmaker. But Blackmagic is not, it's kind of on the fringe of industry standard. Right now, the industry standard, in my opinion, is Red, it's Alexa, and it's Sony. And if you're kind of outside of those three, you're not technically using industry standard equipment. Canon is kind of on the fringe, and I don't really see a lot of it being used in a lot of like industry productions. I see it being used in a lot of small documentary things and stuff like that. But when you're on set and you're creating some commercial or something like that, it's about the perception of the people around you, and not only just the perception, but also the ability to convince other people and other crew members that the equipment that you're using is the right equipment to use for the job or to get the job done. And it's something that more exciting about shooting with a Sony Burano on set than shooting with a Blackmagic 6K Pro. right? Not only is the quality different and the features different and the being able to build it out, that's different, but just the perception, the perceived value of shooting on one versus the other. I think they both could probably get the job done, but one is more widely used and more seen as a industry standard camera. And so we come into this kind of, area where, you as a filmmaker, you have to kind of decide like what it is that you want to do and what it is. Now, if you're a cinematographer for hire, it may make sense for a RE or Red camera to be in your arsenal, right? But if you're a small business owner and majority of your work is done, around town, does it necessarily make sense to have a $30,000, $50,000 camera in your arsenal? I don't know. I don't think it does. I think it makes it a very superficial purchase at that point. And if you look at the history of like what I've done on this page, I believe it's mostly been geared towards trying to find that gear that suits your needs, that doesn't break the bank, but also gets the job done. And we can geek out about gear and all that stuff, but I think the flex is not really the gear that you have. in all cases, especially if you're a small business owner, the flex is being able to say that you've built a profitable business, in a business that, when you're ready to step away from creating films and that you could step away from it, and maybe you have a replicable what am I trying to say? A process that is able to be duplicated and repeated, that you're able to bring on different crew members, have full-time staff, be able to provide opportunities for up-and-coming filmmakers in your area. I think that's more of the flex, more so than the gear that you have and the purchases that you've made. And I think there's a difference there in the mindsets, but I feel like it's very easy to confuse the two. I would love to discuss this a little bit more in future videos, but I brought this up to explain kind of what I meant with the last couple of videos I've created. Not that what a lot of people who are creating, videos and reviews online, not that they're wrong in what they're saying or wrong in what they're promoting and how they're promoting it. I feel like this is like huge consumerism, like buy the latest and greatest thing. Oh, that thing is outdated. There's that aspect of creating YouTube videos that I kind of don't necessarily think or agree with in the sense of like the reality of creating a business. You do not have unlimited funds to go out and just buy and buy and buy. The reality of it is that a lot of people who are buying this gear are, and this, I guess this goes into a different topic, but let's just roll with it, right? A lot of people who are buying that gear, they're paying for it with residual income. And I've lived on both sides of this, and I still do. I mean, we create, me and my wife, we're full-time YouTubers and Instagrammers and all that other stuff, and social media influencers, whatever you want to call it. And we create content and we get paid for that content, and that money comes in. And soon you have a catalog of films and videos that are online that bring in residual income, and that income continues to make money, and it continues to bring in stuff, and it brings it in much more consistently than being a full-time filmmaker. If you're a full-time filmmaker, there's a difference in the way that that money comes in. And I think this is the kind of root of it. As a social media influencer and someone who's creating YouTube videos online, residual income comes in, and it just comes in and it flows. And all you have to do is make another video to bring in more money, right? And there's a comfort level that comes along with that, knowing that all I have to do is create another video, or all I have to do is create a video on this camera that I just purchased, and then that way I can get my money back quickly. So it's not a really big deal whether I buy this $6,000 camera or not, because all I gotta do is make a video about it and do a couple of reviews, and then do a first look video, and then I post it out there, and then I can get that money back, right? There's a difference in when you make a decision about your purchases, and that is your reality, than when you're a full-time filmmaker, and your reality is like, hey, I need to find another client, and then I need to massage that client, and then I need to make sure that client is satisfied with my work, and then I can get that money back, right? You can't just pull out a new client out your, you can't just go out and just get a new client all the time. It doesn't necessarily work like that. You can have dry spells. You could have 6 months of great work and then 6 months of no work. And that's the kind of reality of a full-time filmmaker, someone who's actually doing the business and the business alone. The money is different. And there's a comfortability level that causes you to either spend more or spend less in those two scenarios. And I think as a filmmaker, you have to decide which side you're on. And the same thing could be said when you have a 9 to 5. Some people, either have their 9 to 5 and then they also do this on the side, right? They do filmmaking on the side and have the 9 to 5. I was that guy, and you like, hey, I'll go out and buy this camera real quick. I'm gonna get paid again on Friday. I'm gonna get paid again in 2 weeks. It's all right. I'll just spend this money, and then that doesn't work like that in the full-time filmmaking world. So there's a sense of responsibility I feel like there needs to be had, where you have to be somewhat responsible for understanding there's some people who are not able to just go out here and just buy. That's not your responsibility to make people make good decisions. But what I'm saying here is that I think it needs to be said that there's a difference, and there's a reason why someone is able to purchase something so loosely versus someone who's not able to purchase something as loosely. And I think there's a difference between like some people who are I guess fronting as this is what they do, this is what I do, this is how I make my money, I'm a filmmaker, blah blah blah, and it's not really the case. And I think there has to be some type of discernment when we create and promote this type of content. So I say all that to say, this is why I'm kind of on the fence about purchasing certain gear. And so when I go through my purchasing process for my business, I keep it separate from what I do as a social media influencer, right? My social media influencing work, I can do that with a cell phone. Don't need anything else. I can do it with a cell phone and natural light. I can do it with a DJI Osmo Pocket 3 in natural light. Don't need all this stuff, right? And so, I mean, I'm using a Godox SL60 for Christ's sake. Like, it's $100 light. Don't need an aperture light for my studio. For this work. I don't need that, right? And so when that's like the division for me in my head is, hey, like this stuff is making this money. This stuff over here, the influencer stuff, is making this money. Yeah, that's cool. But the business needs to be, the filmmaking business needs to be able to fund itself. And there's nothing wrong with taking funds from over here and putting it over here and using it for that. But I prefer for the business to create itself, as far as like, does the work that I'm doing justify me buying and purchasing this equipment? No, it doesn't. Otherwise, I'm just spending money on gear that's superficial, and I'm just, getting rid of my capital for no reason. And to each his own. But I really do enjoy the idea of just building a business from the ground up, and actually allowing that business to produce the money that goes back into that business. And I think that allows me to kind of stay a little bit grounded on my decision making about what cameras I choose to buy. And so when I start looking into a new camera, I'm looking at Sony. Yeah, Sony's great, and Sony does this and Sony does that. And yeah, it's more widely accepted as the industry standard, but is what I need, do I need industry standard for the work that I'm doing? No, I'm rarely on these sets, and I'm not trying to be a cinematographer for hire for, commercials and these big sets. I really want to be the small town, like, filmmaker, creating, films monthly for different small businesses. I want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy in the industry in LA creating films, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not what I am trying to do. And so when it comes to making a decision about which camera to use, I could care less what the industry sees as the standard, right? Care less about my client seeing a GMV light versus an aperture light. He doesn't know the difference. That person doesn't know the difference. Care less about him seeing a Blackmagic camera versus a FX6 or a Sony Burano. They care less. To them, a camera is a camera. Does it look good? Oh yeah, great. I can build it out. I can make it look like a huge camera. They don't know the difference between Sony Burano and a Blackmagic 6K Pro. They don't know the difference between those two. I could tell them that they cost the same price. They don't know. And so there's just a sense of I guess there's a superficial sense that comes in there when we're talking about like industry standard stuff and versus like small business owner, filmmaker. And so when you do see my content, I think that's what I'm really getting at. When you do see my content, you do see my opinions, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the place of, hey, I'm a filmmaker who is creating work for my clients, and my clients are small business owners, they're organizations, they're this, they're that. And so a lot of the stuff that I talk about and stuff that I promote is from that lens. the person who may not need to have all the industry stuff or industry standard stuff, but the person who, is trying to get the job done with the equipment that they have or equipment that they can afford. And so it is possible to create a business around that and centered in that. And I think part of this video is me convincing myself of this as well, because sometimes you have to talk about it and explain it for yourself to get it and understand it. And so for me, that's where a lot of the perspective from this channel comes from. So I've got the C80 coming in. It actually will hopefully be here tomorrow. And I also, I'm going to review that in some real world scenarios. I'm going to give you my opinions on it. And probably what I'll be doing is using some EF glass on that. I will use some RF glass as well, but I'll be using some EF glass because if I were to purchase the C80, as of right now, I would be adapting and using the EF lenses that I have. And when it comes to the Sony A7 IV, I'll be using that as well. I also went ahead and rented the 24-7 and G2, 2.8 G2, and I am going to use that combination, and that's a pretty affordable camera and could be an option for me when I'm talking and discussing about possibly finding cameras for other people to use when they're working with me in my business. And that could be a good entryway into the Sony system, and also give me the opportunity to have a camera that not only does autofocus, not only does video work, but also does photography as well. And so could be a good choice. I would love to see how that works. Probably gonna be shooting in some S-Log. Probably going to be using screw-on ND filter, and I think this is a good like little test that I can go through this week. Like I said, this next week is going to be a whirlwind of stuff going on, but I wanted to hop on and throw out these thoughts in this conversation. Now, let me know in the comments below if you have something you would like to discuss. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions as well, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.